The paint cup on the table was still wet when
Where did she
Diep
go?
called, "Nhi!" and heard
Are
nothing
you there?
back. 1 minute earlier, her 6-year-old
Nhi?
had been coloring an
Where are
orange
you?
duck and laughing with Grandma.
She's not
Now the
here.
room felt too quiet, like the house had lost its heartbeat. And that tipped-over duck looked like a warning. When James answered, his voice flipped from CEO to father in a single
What
breath.
does this mean?
Like and subscribe so families learning to protect each other calmly and clearly
can find stories like this.
Hello, and welcome back. The day started like a good day from the beginning, quiet enough to trust. Diep had her hands in the garden soil before the kettle even finished boiling. Basil trimmed, lime sapling watered. A small, quiet routine that made her feel like she owned her breath again. Inside, James moved through his morning like he was built for 2 worlds at once. Coffee, keys, one quick kiss on Diep's forehead, then straight into office mode. "Text me if anything feels off," he said, calm. "Same to you," Diep replied. Nai, 6 years old, serious about her projects, was in the living room with James's mother, coloring little toy figures. She held up a tiny plastic duck and asked with full authority, "Can I make the duck orange?" James's mother laughed softly, the kind of laugh that sounded like a door finally opening. "Dip the brush in water first," she coached. "Then you'll see." Nhi did it, tongue peeking out in concentration. Orange spread across the duck's wings, bright and uneven. James's mother clapped quietly like it mattered, and Diep felt a small wind settle into her chest. Normal was happening, not perfect, just present. By late morning, James was in a conference room, voice steady, moving through a clean agenda. Operations, rollout timing, training checklists. No drama, just keep it measurable. Diep was back from the garden and at Hill Fruits, wiping shelves and checking the cold unit log, making sure the day stayed smooth. Then, without warning, everything did that one sudden shift. Not loud, not cinematic, just the kind that drops your stomach. Diep came home for 1 minute to grab a water bottle and a snack before the afternoon rush. She pushed the door open and called out, "Nai." No answer. She heard the shower running. James's mother's voice floated from the bathroom. "I'm here, 1 minute." Diep stepped into the living room and stopped. The paint cup was still wet. Toy figures were scattered like someone had been excited. The little duck lay on its side, orange streaks half finished, as if the room had paused mid-breath. But no Nai. Her heart jumped hard enough to make her palms go cold. "Nai?" She called again, sharper this time. James's mother came out with a towel in her hair. "What is it?" Diep kept her tone controlled, but the fear was real underneath it. "Where is she?" James's mother frowned, then froze. I thought you picked her up." Diep stared. "I've been at the shop." James's mother's face went pale. "She was sitting right here," she whispered. "I only stepped away for a minute." Diep didn't waste time on blame. She did what James had taught her. Steps. Bedroom, kitchen, garden gate, front walkway. Her eyes moved like a checklist. Her hands stayed steady even while her throat tried to close. The orange duck stayed in her mind like a warning sign she couldn't ignore. Nothing. She grabbed her phone and called James. He answered on the first ring, still in office voice. "Diep?" Diep kept her words clean. "Nye isn't here. Your mom thought I picked her up. I didn't." There was a pause, just one breath, and James's voice changed instantly from CEO to father. "I'm coming, Hata," he said. "Right now." He didn't argue with anyone. He didn't explain. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and left the meeting mid-sentence, leaving the room to keep measuring itself without him. On the street, Diep moved fast but smart, calling out to neighbors, scanning corners, checking small shops nearby. She didn't shout her panic. She let her feet do the shouting. "Mister." Hung saw her face and didn't ask questions twice. He just said, "Which direction?" "Any," Diep answered, voice tight. "Mister." Hung nodded once and started walking the opposite side of the block, like a calm patrol. Eyes trained on doorways and sidewalks. Officer Thu arrived quietly. No siren energy, no panic, just presence. She took in the wet paint on Diep's fingers, the towel still clutched in James's mother's hands. The way Diep's shoulders were held too high. "Tell me the last confirmed moment," Thu said. Diep pointed toward the living room window. She was coloring. Then she wasn't. James's mother's hands shook. "It's my fault," she kept whispering, like repeating it could rewind time. Diep swallowed hard and forced her voice gentle. "We'll talk later," she said. "Right now we find her." James pulled up, got out of the car, and looked at Diep like he needed to see her eyes to stabilize his own. "We do this clean," he said low. "No spiraling. We check places in order." "Oh," Thu nodded. "I can check nearby cameras," she said. "Not as drama, just as efficiency." They moved like a team, each person taking a slice of the neighborhood the way James would assign roles on a big delivery day. Toy shop near the corner. Small cafe where the owner knew Nye's favorite straw. Park entrance with the faded swing set. Market path where vendors always noticed kids. At the toy shop, the clerk leaned over the counter the moment she saw Diep's face. "Little girl," she said, already reaching for a receipt pad. "Short hair? Big eyes?" "Yes," Diep answered, relief and fear colliding. The clerk nodded toward the shelf of small animals. "She was here 10 minutes ago with an older man. Not rough, not rushing. He paid for a duck toy, and she kept telling him, 'Orange, orange, orange.'" James's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed even. "Did you recognize him?" "I don't know him," the clerk said. "But he looked like family." He held her hand like it mattered. James's mother pressed a hand to her mouth. "Oh God." Diep didn't let that sentence finish. She touched James's arm once, grounding, not permission. "We follow the clue," she said. Officer Thu wrote the time down and added, "That means she's walking, not hidden. We're close." Right now. James kept his voice low and clear. 1 lap. Then we widen. Diep followed the plan, because plans kept fear from turning into noise. But every time she passed a doorway, her mind flashed the image of the orange duck lying on its side, paint still wet, as if home itself had reached out to say, something changed. Then Mr. Hung called out from across the street. I see someone, he said. Over there. Diep turned, breath caught halfway, and for 1 second the whole world narrowed to the place his hand was pointing. The person Mr. Hung had pointed at wasn't a stranger. It was James's father. He stood on the far sidewalk with his shoulders squared, like a man who still believed posture could fix mistakes. Beside him, Nye walked happily, licking something sweet, one hand clutching a small shopping bag. A toy duck's orange beak peeked out of the top. Diep's knees almost gave out. Relief hit so hard it made her dizzy, but she kept her steps steady because Nye was watching. Nye saw her first and ran. Mom, she sang, like she'd been away for 5 minutes. She wrapped both arms around Diep's waist and squeezed. Diep held her tight, eyes closed, breathing her in like oxygen. The warm smell on Nye's breath, coconut milk and sugar, was the clearest proof on earth. James arrived behind them and stopped short. He didn't shout. He didn't storm. But his voice went tight when he said, Dad. James's father lifted one hand, palm out, asking for space to speak. I brought her back, he said quickly. I didn't know you'd worry like this. Diep looked at him, half laughing, half crying. Of course we'd worry. James's mother rushed forward, towel still in her hands. You took her without telling anyone? James's father blinked, genuinely stunned. I thought you would tell them, he said. I came back early from the trip. She was coloring. She asked to go out. He swallowed. I wanted to do something good. James exhaled hard through his nose, forcing himself calm. Doing something good requires communication, he said. James's father nodded immediately. No defense. No pride. You're right, he said. I'm wrong. Nye tugged at Diep's shirt, impatient for the important part. Mom, look! She lifted the bag proudly. Grandpa bought me the duck, and I ate sweet soup. She turned to James' mother with a bright smile. Grandma, I was brave. James's mother's eyes filled. You were, she whispered. But you scared us. Nye considered this like a tiny judge. I didn't mean to, she said seriously. Then she added, as if offering evidence, we also sold pumpkins with a nice auntie. I was very good. James blinked. You sold pumpkins? Nye nodded fast. The auntie had a table. She let me say 2 for 1. I did it. She lifted her chin. I have business skills. James's father looked embarrassed and earnest at the same time. There was a woman outside the market, he explained, selling little pumpkins for decoration. Nye stopped to talk. The woman was kind. I thought it was harmless. Diep's relief stayed, but a quiet caution threaded through it. Kind still required a text. She lowered her voice so Nee wouldn't feel punished for being happy. "Thank you," she told James's father. "You made her day bright." Then she added, calm but firm, "But we need one rule." James's father straightened as if he'd been handed a policy. "A rule," he repeated. James said it clearly, the same way he spoke in meetings when he wanted no misunderstanding. "If Nye moves locations, we text the family group. Every time. No exceptions." James's mother nodded hard. Every time. James's father didn't argue. He looked at Diep, and his voice softened into something like understanding. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't realize how much peace you've had to protect." Diep's throat tightened. "Now you do," she said. They walked home together. No lecture on the sidewalk, no public punishment, just a family resetting the line while the adrenaline faded. Back in the living room, the orange-painted duck figure was still on the table, tipped on its side, paint drying. Diep set Nee's new duck toy beside it for 1 second, like proof that the story had returned to where it belonged, home. Nye yawned, the big yawn of a child who had spent her bravery for the day. James carried her to bed and let her arrange her prizes with serious care. The duck tucked into her arm, a small hat placed beside her pillow like a trophy. "Tomorrow," Nye murmured sleepily, "I will do safe surprises." James brushed her hair back. "That's the best kind," he said. In the kitchen, he made the family group chat right then and pinned one message at the top. "If Nee changes location, text immediately." 1 sentence is enough. James's father replied first. "Understood. I will follow it." James stared at the screen a moment longer than he needed to. Then his shoulders dropped. "Fast search," he said softly. "Fast truth," Diep answered. James's mother washed the paint cup in silence, then set it back where Nye could reach it. "We keep the joy," she said, voice small. "We just keep the rules, too." No one argued, because it was true today. Later, when the house finally quieted, Diep and James stepped into the garden for 1 minute. Basil sharpened the night air. The lime sapling lifted pale leaves toward the porch light. "Tomorrow we go back to work," James said. Diep nodded. "And tomorrow stays happy," she replied. But as she looked back through the window, her eyes caught the pinned message glowing on James's phone, and her mind circled one small detail that didn't fit neatly into a checklist. A nice auntie, a pumpkin table, and a 6-year-old proudly practicing sales without anyone texting the family first.